We remember the time a young team from the Gulf took the football world by storm. And we meet one of world football's most promising young talents. At first glance, Velez Mostar is a club like many others throughout Europe. The small squad are in the drop zone of their domestic league, and the fear of relegation hangs heavily over them, a fear exacerbated by the recent economic crisis. And just to rub salt in the wound, their local rivals are flying high at the top of the league table. But as they play Čelik in the final weeks of the Bosnia-Herzegovina season, the reasons this club faces such problems lie much deeper than just a poor run of form, and hide a history that stands in stark contrast to what is happening today. That's because it's not that many years since Bosnia-Herzegovina's fight for independence. In those dark times, the town of Mostar was the scene of some of the war's worst atrocities. Fighting had erupted because, as Yugoslavia broke up, the government in Belgrade refused to accept Bosnia-Herzegovina as an independent state. It meant that the three ethnic groups that had lived peacefully together were divided, with the Yugoslav-supported Serbs fighting the Croats and Muslims. In Mostar, the Yugoslav army had been forced out, but by this point Croatian nationalists were planning to develop a Croat community within the region and aimed to have Mostar as its capital. In what became known as the War Within the War, Croatian forces turned on their Muslim neighbours in May 1993. Basing themselves on the west of the Neretva River, the Croat military attacked the East Bank, home to the majority of Muslims. The 9-month siege also saw the Stari Most Bridge, built in the 16th century and a symbol of unity between East and West, destroyed. The war also marked the end of the Velez golden era. Mensur Durakovic is the club's sporting director.
Before the war, the team played the game wonderfully, with a lot of passion and respect for the opposition. Back then, we were one of the most popular teams in Yugoslavia and did well both in domestic competitions as well as European tournaments. But that was then.
Between 1970 and the outbreak of war, Velez, a predominantly Muslim club, featured some of Yugoslavia's most exciting players. Dusan Bajovic was perhaps their greatest, amassing 29 goals in 37 games for his country, including a hat-trick against Zaire in the 1974 FIFA World Cup. Up against the great teams of Belgrade, Split and Zagreb, Velez were Yugoslav League runners-up on 3 occasions, domestic cup winners twice, and admired by many. It was here that those glory days were played out, in the 20,000-capacity Bijeli Brijeg Stadium. But unfortunately for Velez, it lies in the west of the city. It's now home to Zrinski, who represent the Croat population and are odds-on to win this season's Premier League.
This is a very difficult subject to talk about. I would be at the stadium, watching Velez win all the time. That stadium is ours and is a symbol of our success, our traditions and our ambitions. But we have been thrown out of it. After all our success, we're now in times when things are bad and the future is uncertain. It's terrible for everything the club stands for all it achieved, and for all the fans who loved us.
Their adopted home is in Vrapčići, a place just outside Mostar that was nothing more than a field when they arrived. They've spent what resources they have on erecting stands, but the rebuilding process is long and slow. Rebuilding the squad also takes time, but with young players coming through and a new coach at the helm, perhaps the turning point is near.
I certainly hope so. I came here because of the club's great tradition and its popularity across former Yugoslavia. And I think emotionally, I wanted to help the team take the steps it needs to take. This can definitely happen, especially with the amount of love there is for Velez.
In Mostar, the bridge has been rebuilt and Croats and Muslims now live together peacefully. But the scars of war remain, and separate schools and hospitals are evidence that ethnicity is still a major issue. But Velez are keeping their focus on the future, and they welcome players from both sides of the bridge.
First, you need to know that Velez is a symbol of Mostar, and Mostar, the old bridge, and Velez are all symbols of a united Bosnia-Herzegovina. The most important thing is that people should still live for the club. That's especially true of the older fans.
With a match against Zrinski coming up, club officials and police meet with fan groups, an illustration as to how raw some feelings still are, and how close the team is to its supporters. Zenan Durakovic is a current player and the sporting director's son.
Being from Mostar, this is the biggest game for me. It means the most to me. I would be fine not to play the whole season except for this game. I'd give my life to play in it.
Whilst the team may never hit the heights they reached before the war, the club will ensure that their legacy will never be forgotten. And for both the players and their supporters, they're beginning to find strength and togetherness because of the great adversity with which they've been faced.
Talking about the club is very emotional. I'm very proud to be working for Velez Football Club, even though we have all of these problems. I feel that when these problems have been sorted out, in the future the bond between the fans and the club will become even stronger. The reason this club carries on with all the problems, and the main reason we can pull ourselves out of trouble, is due to the fans who give us unconditional support. The love between the club and the fans is unbreakable and will last as long as we live. Maybe even longer.